own operation with the intention of improvement in either or both along the way. So, welcome. So, in terms of the agenda, first of all, can I have the apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Edwards-Walker and Councillor Linthwaite.
Okay. Right. Public party, there's no one here, unless you would like to. Would you like to say a few words, Councillor Phillips?
Merely to say that I've just been trying to reform Scrutiny. It's been done very badly in Derbyshire. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you very much. So, turning to item number 3, that's the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Chair, yeah?
Second, Chair. I can't vote on it, but obviously on page 4, you've done a resolve business as regards to the revised minutes.
Sorry,
it says resolved, and it says that the revised minutes of the meeting on Scrutiny Committee held on the 6th of December 2024. It's only a typo error, obviously, but if we've already changed the minutes in a sense that you've said something because it was saying the revised minutes and such like. So I'm just making that point before you vote on to say whether they are a true and correct record. It's on page 4, right at the top. It'll be 23, won't it, I suppose? Nothing major, but I just thought, well, if we've already changed the minutes.
we haven't progressed two of the items on that to the extent that I'd hoped, and I think that we need to bring that up under the progressing the flood scrutiny exercise and the work on the consultation and the consultation process. I think that we agreed at that meeting, so I'd like to bring those up again later on. So would anybody like to move approval of the minutes?
I'll move it, Chair.
Thank you, Calder. Sorry, Laura, isn't it? Over there. Yeah.
I'll move it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And Roger, your second. Okay, all those in favour? That's unanimous. You're abstaining, okay. Yeah.
So obviously, I don't know what was said or anything.
Okay.
Pardon?
You can move.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving to item number 5, which is the future workforce for Derbyshire Dales District Council.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, members, this report builds upon 2 previous reports that members have considered regarding the issue of workforce planning for the council. The first of which was a report to council back in September of last year, and then the second report came to this scrutiny committee on the 19th of October. I was tasked with taking forward those particular issues and looking in more detail as to what the implications would be for the council in terms of both the financial impact but also logistically how we may actually move forward with considering and potentially introducing some of these measures. So that really is what this report is about. It takes forward many of the same initiatives. There are some new initiatives included, and the report has been brought up to date in terms of costings and workforce profiles and the like. And really what we've tried to do is to identify measures which may be regarded as tactical measures that the council could choose to introduce with relatively little additional financial cost, and then perhaps the more strategic measures which the council may wish to consider and introduce, which clearly would need to be financially costed and considered by the appropriate committee, be that Governance and Resources Committee or council itself in terms of approval of budgets. Chair, I wasn't planning to go through every single measure. I would hope that members have had the opportunity to actually read them, but I'm very happy to comment on individual areas that we've highlighted within this report. But if I can just say that increasingly it is proving extremely challenging for the District Council to attract and retain quality employees in certain professional disciplines. Members will be aware of the challenges that we've had the last 12 months in our planning department, and they are ongoing. We've had similar challenges within our economic development functions, inability to recruit and retain qualified staff. Prior to that, we've had issues within finance, in audit, environmental health, and to a lesser extent in housing. So almost every area of the council's key activities has in some way been impacted by the workforce challenges that we are encountering. I think the second point I want to make is that we're not alone. Local government as a sector is having these challenges, and there are initiatives which have been developed by the LGA. In fact, the Make a Difference campaign is going to be launched tomorrow by the LGA, with the sole intention of making people aware of the vast opportunities that a career in local government can actually bring. So we very much want to be on the front foot with that, but we can't ignore that there are certain measures that this council could take, should it so wish, that others have taken, which would improve our ability to attract and retain the calibre of employees that you as members and our residents rely upon to deliver the services that you require. So that really is the foundation of this report. As I say, you may choose to go through it in a particular way, Chair, but I'm happy to take the report as read, but we'll be delighted to answer any questions on any of the individual members that matters that members should so wish to raise.
So starting with questions, has anybody got any questions on this report? Roger.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paul. It's an incredibly comprehensive report, and I can see where it's coming from in virtually every respect. In one way, it reads quite depressingly, doesn't it? In the sense that it seems like we have a huge range of tasks that the council needs to undertake to make itself competitive with other organisations, not just in the other councils, but other organisations that recruit the same kind of people with the same kind of skills that we're looking for. So I don't doubt its intent and its importance, and I agree. I think probably pretty much with the recommendations. The thing that I suppose I'd just like a little bit more reassurance on, and I might be asking for the impossible, is it talks about the financial implications, but I'm struggling to get a feel for which of these might be the most cost effective. So I'm probably asking the impossible here when I ask you to crystal ball gaze. But for example, if you regrade certain posts, have we got a sense of what that is likely to save us in terms of consultancy fees? So what I'm getting at here is in the report I can't see the trade-offs which we might make financially. I can see a reference to £650,000 being available in the recruitment and retention reserve, but I don't know whether that's the pot we've got to play with all of these measures. Thank you.
Happy to respond to that, Chair. In terms of the easy measures, if there are any such easy measures, the way that I've tried to split the report is, as I say, into the tactical and the strategic. So the tactical measures outlined in paragraph 9.2, they are pretty cost effective in terms of working within the existing budgets that that we have, and they can be done relatively easily in terms of changes in policies and procedures. The strategic measures outlined at paragraph 9.3, they are the ones which could have significant financial impacts, and I've intentionally not expressed within this report which of the measures members should move forward with. I think it would be helpful to have a steer from Scrutiny Committee as to which measures you think are most relevant, perhaps most affordable as well, because ultimately we will need to progress a lot of this through the Governance and Resources Committee. So to take the point that you raised, Councillor Shelley, regarding consultancy fees, if you was to take the planning establishment at the moment, the amount that council is committed to spend in the current financial year on interim consultancies, then that in a single year would significantly outweigh the cost of introducing the grade 14 senior manager utilisation. So the types of individuals that we're looking to attract have left the authority below grade 14. If we was able to bring that grade into effect, that would improve the prospects of recruiting and retaining, and we could have that offset in terms of the consultancy cost. The same would apply in finance, because when we had to bring the additional staff into finance, it was that grade 13-14 boundary was the key, because grade 13 is the upper limit of what we can currently pay our senior managers, and when we bring in the market supplements that we are currently applying, they tip it into what would be grade 14. So the assumption is that if we could have grade 14 as a permanent part of the salary grade, that would improve attractiveness, reduce market supplements, and limit the need for external consultants to assist us. So I haven't quantified it in financial terms like that, because it depends which post you're picking on. But there is definitely a trade-off between the consultancy cost and the utilisation of that grade. If you move lower down the pay scale, the issue regarding grade boundaries is particularly pertinent regarding many of our sort of clean and green operational staff and our business support staff, because the pay grades of the vast majority of those employees is very much around grade 5, 6 and 7. So again, we do have challenges recruiting to our clean and green operations, particularly HGV drivers. That's been one of the most recent challenges. So what we're looking to do there is to modify the grading boundaries and allow greater career progression. So we have costed that particular option, and in the report that is just short of £100,000. That's not a one-off cost though. That is a cost which would then feature in the base budget and be reflected every year thereafter.
Roger, do you want to come back?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Thank you. Laura, would you like to come?
Thanks. Possibly a noddy question, but I have read the report, but I only had time to read it once and quickly. So I was just wondering if you could clarify the situation with regard to adjusting grade boundaries, and to what extent are we bound by the national civil service structure? How much flexibility do we actually have on that?
The simple answer is we're not bound. We can determine where our grade boundaries lie. So this grading structure was originally implemented by the Council 2009-2010. It has been modified since then to reflect changes in the pay spines agreed through the National Pay Awards. But as to where the boundaries lie, that is entirely within our gift. What would be required is to renegotiate any changes with the relevant trade unions. So we can set the boundaries. As I say, that's the scale, and that's how it's come about.
Sorry, and just to follow, when you say grade boundaries, is that the salary boundaries or the job description responsibility levels?
Well, the two are linked, because in terms of establishing the grade boundary, then as part of the national terms, we have to go through a process of job evaluation. So what the job evaluation process attempts to do is to ensure fairness and parity and equal pay for jobs of equal value and equal responsibility. So in going through that process, jobs are scored across a whole series of factors which I mentioned in the report, and at the end of that a score will come out, and depending on what that score is will determine where on the pay and grading structure that post fits. So if you have a look at page 27, to give you an example, if you pick grade 7 at the moment, so that goes from 410 points to 444, and across that there are, how many, there's a 7 different spinal column points. Now effectively what that means is that that job has been evaluated at no more than 444 points, and that employee could actually be appointed within that grading boundary. So they can't be paid any less than 28,282, and they can't be paid any more than 31,364. So the issue we're having is that irrespective of what some of these posts score under the job evaluation scheme, the salary that we're able to offer is not competitive in the marketplace out there. Case in point being HGV drivers. You know, a HGV driver could earn more potentially in the private sector than the council will be able to pay relative to our grading structure.
Roger, would you like to come back? Yeah. Sorry.
Question is golden arrivals, golden handshakes as they come in. Do you think that gives the impression to the other employees that they could be a bit of friction with that?
I think there's always a risk of that, in fairness, and the same applies to when we have to apply market supplements. So we do have a number of employees at the moment who are in receipt of market supplements because our attempts to recruit at what would be the established grade have proved unsuccessful, and it has to be unsuccessful for at least 2 attempts to recruit. But what we are seeing every time we have to go through that process is you've got more and more delay in the recruitment. It puts more pressure on those employees who are trying to cover the absence of those posts, and it's taking far too long to try and get people in position. So the incentive with the welcome payment is that it just gives you that little opportunity to try and attract somebody who may not otherwise be attracted to the published pay grade. But it's certainly not a long-term solution. Ideally, I would like to have a workforce which is not reliant on welcome payments or market supplements. But the position of the market at the moment is such that it will be very difficult for us to survive without that.
Yeah. The other question is retention of the staff. I know we're up against pay levels in the private sector are much higher, and that's one of the biggest problems we face. But retention of the other staff, is there any, as the staff get older, we're really struggling, aren't we, really? The younger staff are a big gap, so is there any way of bringing in apprentices and graduates to fill them spots in? I know we try to do that, but should we put more emphasis on that, bring in apprentices and graduates in?
Well, we do have an active programme of apprentices. We have had that for quite a few years. Clearly, the type of individuals that you can sometimes bring in on apprentices is not always at the level of position that you might be recruiting to. But Section 7 of the report talks about our programme of graduates and apprentices, and we have been very successful with that, both in terms of attracting people into those posts and in a good number of cases actually retraining them. And you know, we have examples of people who've actually managed to secure positions elsewhere in the authority following the end of their apprenticeship. So that's exactly what we want to try and do. But when you're trying to recruit, for example, a development manager, like we are at the moment, the answer is not an apprentice.
No, of course not.
You need someone who's got the level of experience and the like to be able to do that role. So, yes, it's an opportunity, but it's not the panacea for all.
You think we should go into schools and talk to graduates and students to the advantage of coming work in local government?
Well, absolutely, and that is part of the programme that's going to be launched tomorrow by the LGA, the Make a Difference. It's about identifying, as I say, local government as an attractive career, which actually does, very much reflect a lot of the principles that perhaps the younger generation have. Climate change, making a difference, dealing with social inequality. So it's not just about working for the council, it's trying to basically say, if you work for the council, there are so many areas that you can get involved in to really make a difference to your local area. So that is very much the approach that's being taken, and the experience in the North East, which did the pilot exercise, has proved tremendously successful, such that it is being rolled out nationally. So we very much want to be on the back of that, and hence one of the recommendations in the report is to actually set aside a budget to enable us to do that.
Thank you. Councillor G.
Yeah, just following on from Councillor Slack, with this apprenticeship system, are we actually liaising with universities that are doing these type of courses, where I know there's these Master of Planning courses where they actually look for homes for students to go out for 1 year in I think it's the 4th year of their planning, and they have lists of private sector and councils that deal with that, so you're forefront to bring that in, because of course if you can bring, and they're supposed to come in and actually do the job, they're not coming in to do photocopying and stuff like that. The idea is that they're capable of doing the job, obviously at that level, but that surely would free up some of the more senior officers to probably climb the ladder within the organisation.
Certainly has the potential to. We do liaise with universities, planning schools and the like, and we often approach them when we've got vacancies. There is a balance to be struck, however, between giving somebody work experience, which inevitably does require quite a degree of supervision and guidance and instruction, as opposed to bringing somebody in and then working actively and contributing towards the organisation over a period of perhaps 18 months. We've had success and failures on both sides, if I'm honest. But yes, we do have those discussions, and we do and have attracted people into those positions who've ultimately ended up staying with us. So it is something that has happened, but perhaps not on the scale to address some of the more significant challenges that we've currently got.
Thanks, Paul. Apologies for being late. I've come over from Birmingham for to get here. Excellent report, Paul. I had a read on the train, kind of on the way here. I was just I'm wondering whether, because we've struggled to recruit in so many positions at the level we want to get people at, have we thought about recruiting maybe at a level lower for the same position as a development post, and then we develop our own people into the roles rather than trying to find someone who's already kind of fit and built, because obviously that's proven to be difficult. I was going to make the same kind of point about kind of building that relationship with universities. We've done a lot. I do a lot in the Birmingham system with the Birmingham universities in terms of bringing management trainees through placements, and they can be quite long placements. We can do up to a year, and I just wonder whether building those relationships, especially with the the Sheffield and the Derby universities, it would be a natural kind of place for students to come. Whether that is another possibility.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the first point, absolutely. And that's one thing that we have done in planning. So we lost our principal planner November of last year. We went out to recruitment twice, couldn't recruit. So we ended up appointing 2 senior planners. And one of the senior planners at interview demonstrated that they were actually not too far off principal officer level. So we appointed them. There is a development plan in place, and we are optimistic that within a relatively short space of time they'll be able to operate at that principal level. So that's probably the most recent example, and I think we need to do more of that. I think there is the opportunity to try and bring people in allow them to experience what we have to offer and develop them. So absolutely, very much in favour of that. I think in terms of the university links, if I'm honest, I think they could be stronger. I think we could do more, certainly with the University of Derby, University of Sheffield, around planning, environmental health, housing type courses. I am part of a Derbyshire Chief Execs group, which is working with the University of Derby on what they're calling a Future Leaders course. So this is very much pitched at the level of senior manager and above. And the University of Derby is wanting to work with Derbyshire authorities to basically develop the whole curriculum. So I have been in active discussions with them, advising the types of skill sets that we would ideally look for in somebody of that type of role. I'm hopeful that will deliver some benefits sooner rather than later. They are, yes.
Councillor G.
I know that Newcastle University are actually looking for partners in the East Midlands because they have students from all over the country, and they've got partners in the North East and they've got them in sort of London area, but they're actually actively looking for the East Midlands.
I ask on that subject, do you think the report covers improved links with universities, or is this something that we might ask you to introduce into it?
It doesn't address it specifically, Chair, but very happy to have that introduced by the committee, because I do think it's a worthwhile initiative that we could pursue.
Would anybody like to make a proposal along those lines, or not, and we can vote on it?
I'll propose to the fact, but I think we ought to, as Councillor G's just alluded to, we need to widen the net as regards which universities we go to, not just our locals. I think, countrywide, to be fair, because, everybody, it's like whenever anybody in Derby might go down to Oxford or the likes to uni for different things, so why not spread the net wider to all universities as a general for the purpose of this, and probably working with the LGA in the fact of how they're trying to, promote that, what they're bringing out. So I would like to propose on that standard of.
I think we'd have to be a bit pragmatic.
Sorry?
I think we'd have to be a bit pragmatic about which universities we approach, but we could leave that delegated to officers.
Could I just jump in on that? Because I think what you need to do is look at the actual roles that you want to fill. So if it's planning, you go to the universities that are actually offering those courses, because it is actually places like Bristol, Birmingham, Newcastle. I know Sheffield do it, and Leeds, but they're the ones. I don't think Derby's really in the picture for that. But you've got to get on the list. You've just got to contact the professors at those universities who are dealing with those students on a daily basis. And, each intake, I think it's normally in the 4th year, that's where they're looking for places for them to go out.
So I just absolutely agree. There's no reason why you wouldn't cast a net in terms of opportunities to every university. I think it's almost a two-pronged thing, though. There's exactly doing that, but I think the opportunity you have with your local universities is about building a relationship with them as an organisation, which you can't. It'd be very difficult to do that with Newcastle or a London-based one. But it doesn't mean to say that we don't put the opportunities out to all students, to all facilities, but then also build those close working relationships. Sheffield will be a great one because they do quite a lot of courses which will be relevant. I do believe Derby do quite a few courses that would overlap, so I think they would be good to build good relationships with. But yeah, Sue's absolutely right. We've got to have that wide net to get the candidates, because I suppose the point is, as you said, a lot of the young people will be from here, from our area. They've gone out, and it's an opportunity to come back home. And the nice thing about that, if they get the opportunity to come back and do a placement, they might come back and live here and work here, which is often we see our young people moving out the area and they never come back, which is sad.
Thank you. Roger.
Yes, just two or three other points taking us in a slightly different direction, if that's okay.
Are you talking about, because we've got a proposal, we've got
I would say it's part of a proposal that we involve spreading us net to go to the universities, and obviously with a bit more, as you said, stipulate, it's obviously we need to go to the places, the universities that are doing the actual academic side of what we are trying to recruit in people. So, so I'll leave that with, it's an open thing whether Councillor G.
I think what it is, we need to actually have a principle. We need to put ourselves forward to these universities that we've got a programme to support their students in this year round. So we actually become on the list, because they do actually have lists of because the professors who are on their course actually reach out to try and place. And as has been said, we've got lots of good students in this area at good schools in Derbyshire that are going off to these universities and they probably want to come back home in that fourth year, and maybe they can still live at home as well and work. So it's not necessarily people who are from London coming here. Well, that would be good as well. But that's the way it works. But we need to actively, as a council, get in touch with these people and make it clear that we want to be part of the game.
So I'm taking the mood of the meeting is that we have an additional recommendation that we go out to universities for recruitment purposes and develop relationships with local universities. So can I park that for the time being, and we'll come back to that one at the end when we've been through all the other recommendations, if that's all right. So, okay.
Thank you. Yeah. I should say I've actually got a slight, not a vested interest, but certainly an interest in this, in that my first job on leaving university was actually as a graduate administrative trainee for a county council. So I see a lot of this coming back round the circuit. I won't tell you how many years ago that was. It was too long ago. And I didn't stay, I must admit. So that tells you something. But I have had experience in both the public sector and the private sector, which is why I come back to my next question, which is on this is something I should know probably, but paragraph 1022 refers to annual increments. And just for my sense of mind here, is it the case, can you tell us that an employee will automatically get an annual increment every year until they reach the top of their pay scale, or is it dependent on performance? That's one question.
It's annual increment every single year until they reach the top of the grade.
Regardless of performance?
Yes.
I'm sure that wasn't the case when I was in local government. Okay, my next question then. So just coming back to that point I made earlier about the financial implications of this, I think I would like to see a stab at some idea of what the overall impact of all of the strategic measures would be if we were to enact them. And sort of related to that, if we did that, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, I think it's interesting if we did do that, would that, in your opinion then, put us ahead of the field in comparison with they're not necessarily competitors, but our comparators? So if we did all of those things, the report references individual cases where other authorities do certain things, but it's not clear if they do all of them.
To answer the question whether it would put us ahead, what I've tried to do in exploring these options is really look at what everybody else is doing. So by no means everybody is doing all of these measures, but I've tried to reflect it back to what do I think the challenges are for us. That grade 14 and the grade boundaries are the biggest challenges for us. That affects the vast majority of our employees on the middle grades, but also our inability to attract and retain the senior managers that operate just below the director level. So they are the two most significant, and I would very much favour the council addressing those, because I think that will address a significant number of the challenges that we currently face. In terms of whether this would put us ahead of everybody if we did all of this, I think the answer is probably yes. I think the question that council needs to consider ultimately is whether all of it can be afforded. So, taking your point, Councillor Shelley, to try and put some context towards what would the cost be of doing all of this. I've not attempted to do that in this report, but I think to present any recommendation to Governance and Resources Committee, that would have to be done. But as I say, any number of these measures will certainly move us into a much more competitive position than where we currently are.
Can I suggest that when you do that, you also include the consultancy bill as well, because that must be quite significant.
On the welfare side, when somebody from wherever, London, Glasgow, comes in and goes to the district, can we promise we'll find them, do our best to find them accommodation and work with them to get a nice place to live? When we go into schools, we can say, like, we have got a policy where we can get you accommodation and a nice place to live. Could be an incentive to come along and work for us.
Well, through you, Chair, we already have that policy in terms of a relocation allowance that the council does provide. I have to say that it's relatively it's used relatively infrequently because in most cases the employees that we attract are within commuting distance of the council. I can only think of 2 cases probably in the last 10 years where we've paid a relocation allowance to assist somebody to move home. But that policy does exist and, is something that a prospective employee could benefit from.
Yeah. So just come back. When we're going to schools or universities, we can stress that we've got a policy to help people when they come to work for us.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to speak at this, Nick?
It was just a couple of points just on the same sort of subject. I mean, I noticed that there's no grade 3 staff. So what roles would normally be in grade 3? And if we haven't got any roles that are pertinent to grade 3, what's the point of having it? And then I noted like the current increment, the way the current increments work is that you get to the top of the grade after only 3 years, which seems remarkably quick, kind of from my experience, that you would become expert in your role within only 3 years to reach the top of the grade. And I just wondered whether actually maybe having more increments in the pay bands gives people, so you don't reach the top so much, because I think there's a psychological thing when you reach the top of your grade, that when you get to the top of your grade and you know that you've hit that ceiling, you either then look for promotion to a higher grade or you look to get out of the organisation. And I just wonder whether you're doing yourself in by not allowing yourself, in the NHS it takes 5 years to get to the top of your grade. And we don't have increments every year in that. But I'm a big believer in increments because it's a really good way of developing people. But I just wonder whether it's an option kind of in your proposal to sort of look at how you work that and develop that. So it takes a bit longer for people to get to the top, but they're rewarded each year for doing the progression. But you just might retain them just that tiny bit longer than you're doing at the moment. Just a thought.
Perhaps I can comment on that last point. Deborah might want to come in on the other points regarding why we've got no staff in grade 3. That's exactly the point that we want to try and address through the career graded posts. So at the moment, the vast majority of employees are on a fixed pay grade, grade 6, 7, whatever it might be. And you're absolutely right. After 3 or 4 years, you're at the top of the grade. So you either are stuck there or you will look to move on because you can't progress any further. With the career graded posts, we are starting to introduce these across the organisation now. And whilst you can move through a broader grade of, say, 6/7, progression will not solely be by annual increment, but it will be by performance and experience. So it might be obtaining a qualification in whatever it might be, planning. So there are gates that you've got to pass through on reaching or attaining a certain level. We think that will help us develop some of our rising stars and our younger potential in the organisation, because we can keep them longer. Whether we keep them very long term is something that nobody can be sure about, but if we can keep them longer and benefit from them and benefit from the investment as well that we put into the training and development of staff, then we think that should help. So the career graded posts is really an approach to that. But do you want to pick up on the grade 3 issue, Deborah?
Yep. Okay, so the bottom of the pay spine is quite a challenge, because the scale points are set nationally by the National Negotiating Committees, and where we draw our scales we decide locally. But you'll notice that grade 2 has only got 1 incremental point in it, and grade 3 has only got 2, and grade 4 has only got 3, and that's because of the squeeze of the national living wage on the bottom of the pay spine. And so if we get a pay settlement this year backdated to the 1st of April, it's possible that the national negotiators will want to revise the pay spine and actually change some of these grade boundaries anyway at the lower levels. And it's because of those changes over the years with the pay awards that actually grade 3 at the moment is now unoccupied. There's nobody in it. All our cleaning staff are in grade 2, but they've only got 1 now, spinal column point, which doesn't seem appropriate. But they have had significant pay awards in recent years to keep above the living wage, much greater than higher up the pay spine.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to question? Would anybody like to move the recommendations? Would you move the one including the additional recommendation? Yeah. Good. Seconded by, okay. So, sorry, I can't hear you, Gareth.
Yeah, sorry, I'd like to move the recommendations 1 and 2, and then the additional recommendation with regard to liaising with having some formal method of putting ourselves forward to, well, universities that are offering these type of roles. And obviously we need to explore which ones they are.
Get the recommendations at the beginning of the report.
Yeah, I think that's what we're
Yeah. Rather than the ones in the body of the report, because I think there are 10 otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're moving all the recommendations and in the report as a whole.
Oh, no, sorry, yeah, I'm making a mistake there, I apologise. So I'll move the recommendations in the body of the report.
Right, okay.
Chair, are we not literally going through those up to it, or are we just pertinently just picking out the questions as was? Because I think we're doing 2 situations of recommending the very beginning, saying the Scrutiny Committee consider what's been put in front of us, but then within the major report we've got recommendations 1 to, I think I've got 15, isn't it? And so I think we've got to be knowing what we're actually recommending, each one of individual, because they do not cover what that first bit says in recommendations 1 and 2.
Yes, Sue's right, yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yes, I agree.
I feel that we should, in my opinion, is we ought to just look through them on the, recommendation 1, what it says, and if we can say yay or nay, and then we move on, just for clarity, because, there's a lot of recommendations, and we've asked the questions for the inside of the report, but what the first bit on the report summary and under the first recommendations that it says on the Agenda 5 item does not really cover the recommendations that are in the full report. That is my feelings. I don't know how others, members of the committee feel.
So you're saying we should look at recommendation 1 starting on page 18 and carry on from there. Has everybody read all the recommendations and are reasonably okay with them?
I have.
So,
obviously, it takes a lot to digest.
It does. Yeah.
And I just felt when we're here, if we're trying to agree to that, I think, maybe, just stop going through them. If there's something that really stands out, then obviously we come back to asking the questions, don't we?
Understood. Okay.
Yeah, could I just make a... Sorry.
Laura first, yeah.
So yes, I was just going to say I agree with Councillor Bull, and we've got 16 recommendations and 17 with the new one. So we need, I think, perhaps first to discuss how we're going to tackle this, because I think Paul's request of us is that we make selections from these 16, not that we move or don't en bloc. So it could be a long conversation, but is the best way to go through them one by one, or? And I'm not sure there's any other way of tackling it, really.
Okay, Councillor G.
Yeah, I think it's just slightly a failing in the way that the report's presented, because, the actual recommendations are asking us to put them forward and then put them forward to governance, committee, isn't it? So.
Yes, I think if we assume that when we look at recommendations 1 to 17 in the body of the, or 16 in the body of the report plus the additional one, we are recommending that they go forward en masse to the Governance and Resources Committee.
Yeah.
Perhaps I could sort of help, Chair. I take Councillor G's point. Perhaps the terminology options may have been a bit clearer, but really what I'm looking for is exactly what Councillor Maelstrom said, in that if there are recommendations in this which the Scrutiny Committee are not comfortable with moving forward with, then I would not progress them to GNR. But ideally, I would like to take a report which will be very similar to this, to GNR, because that next phase will be to formally agree to the introduction of that measure and to commit the financial resources, whatever they may be, to implement that measure. So I am looking for a steer as to which of these 16 recommendations, stroke options, however you want to describe them, members feel about moving forward to that next stage.
Can I just amplify? I suggest the implication of that would be that we would deny the Governance Resources the opportunity to review any of the measures that we excluded, and do we want to take that opportunity away from Governance and Resources? I think that's my point.
David, yes, I agree. That popped into my mind as well, that we could just be, the next GNR meeting could end up being a complete rehash of this, and then putting measures back in that we've discussed and decided against. So is our role better then to discuss these and make recommendations to GNR without actually taking anything out of the report?
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think that is what we have done so far in introducing another recommendation, and also in terms of perhaps commenting on individual recommendations. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is a risk in terms of GNR, but shouldn't have come to scrutiny first then, should it? I mean, the thing is, you're putting two committees in conflict with each other. We can only have our own opinions. If we don't agree with one, we have to say that. That's the unfortunate thing about it being presented to scrutiny. So we can't nullify ourselves because we're worried about another committee. It's come to us first. We need to deal with it. My suggestion would be that the chair, that you, David, just go through each recommendation in turn. If we disagree with it or we have a point on it, we can make a comment. If we don't have any disagreement with it, we will assume we can just accept it, and hopefully we can just quickly kind of whiz through them. Okay. But I don't think there's anything controversial in any of these things. There shouldn't be any mass debate or mass fallout. They all seem like common sense sort of proposals to me.
Right, okay, and I think that's what Sue and Gareth were saying too.
Yeah, could I just interject on this? Because I think what we've got here is quite a few different things that are going to add extra cost to the council. And I can see where Paul's coming from. And I think he's almost suggested that his desired part of this is the idea to be able to have more flexibility with the pay increments. And I think I've heard a comment from Councillor Slack, which was slightly sensible about the issue surrounding these welcome payments. And I sort of agree with him on that. So I'm wondering are we at a stage where we want to pick and choose and put some in and take some out? Oh, that's really what I'm asking. I mean, that's just an example from my perspective.
Well, I think we'll find out if we do as soon Nick suggests and go through them recommendations in turn. So can we start on page 18 and recommendation 1, retaining the market supplement as part of the reward route, and eliminate the requirement of at least 2 failed recruitment attempts beforehand. Laura.
If we're asking for opinions on this particular recommendation, I have reservations about the use of market supplements for the reasons that are spelt out in the report, that they can be divisive, obviously, and I totally appreciate the need to be supportive and flexible in the recruitment crisis that we've got. But in terms of preferred options, that wouldn't be a preferred option of mine unless it was absolutely necessary, and I'm sure that's the only basis on which it's used anyway. But if we can sort of make a comment that we agree about the the potential for divisiveness and that other measures might be preferable within this list.
Is that fine favour with other people?
Well, the only point I would make is this is already current practice. They already do this, so you're basically saying you shouldn't be doing it.
No, we're asked to agree to making it easier, so they don't have to have 2 failed attempts.
I think the issue is that 2 attempts actually raises
to actually increase the use of market supplements.
It would, but the problem with the failed attempts is it delays by months the opportunity to bring in another member of staff.
I come back, I think this is all coming back to perhaps I didn't make it quite clear initially, which is, in a sense, we're being asked to grade these without knowing what, in some cases we do know what the cost is likely to be, but in others we don't. We're trying to balance that in our head with the likely effectiveness of these, and we don't know, I'm not sure anybody does, which are going to be more effective than others for the money that's expended, with the exception of the one that Paul particularly highlighted, which I do take on board, which is the grade 14 effect and the way we have a number of senior officer positions there that we're struggling to fill.
What we can do is if we agree that we have a concern about the impact on staff of market supplements, we can just record that and pass that on to governance and resources too. Would that meet your requirement, Laura? Do you be able to note that? Okay, moving on to recommendation 2, retaining welcome payments as part of our recruitment incentives package to increase the maximum payment to £5,000 based on market intelligence and benchmarking information. And to increase the time welcome payments also to be repaid within an increased time of first 3 years of appointment on a sliding scale. So the amount goes up, but also if somebody leaves after 2 years, they still have to repay some of it.
On that, obviously, we were talking about trying to keep them and this increment of it going up, and we're saying 3 years. Well, suddenly we're saying that people are coming in, getting this extra incentive come to us, and they'll only pay it back after 3 years, but in 3 years it's thank you very much, you've trained me up, I've met my top target, I'm off, I'm going to a better job. So maybe we've got to put this in a way that we're showing that the higher scale is going to be met over a longer period of time.
Okay, well, any comments?
I mean, could this welcome payment be changed to a loyalty payment? So you offer a loyalty payment to new staff, which is not given on arrival, it's given at the end of a set amount of time.
After 3 years.
Nick?
So the only thing I'd say about that is then I think you're going to cause inharmony through the rest of the staff group, because they will say, well, how come Johnny here's come into the organisation and he's getting this loyalty payment. I've been here 10 years. I've never had a loyalty payment. And there's probably a skillful way in terms of how you deal with that. But I think broken payments are very common across all industries now. I think the point Councillor Bull made is absolutely spot on. For those higher grade jobs, I think maybe there should be a sliding scale. So your lower end jobs, maybe if you wanted to do a welcome payment in those grades, you could, but you would have a tighter time scale. But for the more senior roles, the department lead roles, exec roles, I think there probably is an argument there to sort of say that you could have maybe a bigger welcome payment, but also a longer period of time, maybe a 5-year sort of penalty if they left the organisation, because you're probably going to invest quite a lot into those members of staff, and so to lose them, I think they should kind of say. But I think these are again just comments that should just be noted and kind of passed on to the other committee.
So at the moment it's going up from 2 years to 3 years, and there is a sliding scale. So do we want to add to the length of the time that it slide over?
High grade,
Okay. All right, we cool. Going on to recommendation 3, expanding the number of career grade posts through the organisation where necessary and desirable in order to enable non-qualified or underqualified staff to be recruited and trained.
I think that's a great idea, as long as there are other senior staff around to make sure they do get the proper development, and there needs to be care that people weren't recruited on this basis and then left to flounder because there was just a shortage of people around them.
Can I also add the point, just coming back to costs and resources again, and I'm not completely fixated on those, believe me, but I can't remember if I've read this in this or in something else, where the organisation should bear in mind the cost of having overlap between those people who are currently carrying out a role and those people who are, if you like, going to succeed into it. So again, I'm not sure if that's actually fully covered in this. So in other words, you'll have people effectively doing, 2 people will be doing the same job for a short period of time.
Yes, Chair, that isn't what this is targeted at. I understand where Councillor Shelley is coming from. There have been 1 or 2 instances whereby, in order to facilitate knowledge transfer, we have had dual appointments, if you like, the outgoing employee and the new incumbent overlapping for a period of time to facilitate that transfer. I have to be honest, that's done relatively few and far between, but Councillor Shelley's point is perfectly valid.
Okay, but generally, does this recommendation meet our approval, and without any particular comment to note? Okay. Recommendation 4 then, increasing the vocational training budget to £50,000 to enable vocational training to be provided in areas of high priority. I would say that I am coming from a particular technology background. I'm actually quite amazed at the lack of generosity in vocational training that seems to be in local government. I myself had a lot of training. I had 6 months of training as a computer programmer by a bank before I was put on the shop floor, so to speak, to do computer programming, and that must have cost the bank a huge amount of money. I was on a good salary at the time, so I feel this is very important, particularly with the costs of becoming in any of these roles: planning, finance, legal, audit, and democratic services. Because to become qualified in local government, you have to pay a lot of money in terms of qualification, in terms of the courses that you have to go on.
I think that's absolutely right, Chair, and the reason why it's been as stringent as it has been is purely down to the amount of finance that's been available. So with the Progressive Alliance providing this recruitment and retention reserve, it is seen as one area of investment which is desperately needed. It will allow us to train some of our rising stars, got a couple of them in the room, and hopefully, retain them in the longer term. We're just not able to do it at the moment with the budgets that the council has currently set.
So I've put my colours on the table, will tell you. All right, so let's go on to
fill that in.
Could I just say, because obviously they're saying 50,000 for that vocational training, could there be a fact of actually how many employees that you're looking to put on that course? Because you're obviously saying 50,000, it depends on how many trainees you're going to get, so it gives the members of the council the understanding of how much they're actually putting it out, or you phase and say, it's that much per year or something like that, or say how many are going to be on that training level.
£50,000 is not an insignificant amount of money, but in terms of university course fees, £9,500–10,000 a year. So it won't fund a huge number, but it is making a difference, particularly if we can do it over the 3 years and get somebody through a 3-year degree course in whatever discipline we're wanting to train them. So there will be a need for prioritisation from a corporate leadership team in terms of identifying those employees that we feel would benefit from this investment and support them through it. So you're probably talking no more than 5 employees a year for the whole of the budget.
In that case, possibly actually stating that within your recommendation would be advisable, because then it's just not an open ticket. For how many employees, you've obviously said we've got 230 at the moment. If they all want to, and I know the oldest people, but you never know. But there is that situation. But I think if you've got a number, it gives everybody else the chance to be able to put their figures into the head. If there's 10 of them, 500,000, don't you? 50,000 per vocational training, how many? And I think if we just put the amount of how many you think would be going forward would be as well within that recommendation.
Thank you. Does that meet approval?
Sorry, I've just got a question. My understanding was that in recommendation for the 50,000 was the annual budget that we're being asked to approve, not per candidate.
Oh, yes,
annual budget, yeah. So there is a fixed amount being put on this. Could I also add, Chair, just on a general note, I think development of staff is far better use of public money than golden handshakes. So if we're asked to sort of grade our preferences, this sort of measure, I think, would be much more appropriate. But I think it would be interested to know whether, has there been any survey? Have the employees been asked actually, on a confidential and hypothetical basis, what would attract you more, a £5,000 golden handshake or a paid degree? Do we know actually what people think?
We've not asked the question in those terms. We do the biannual staff survey, which indicates or asks the questions: what is important to you as an employee? Being paid fairly always comes up at the top, but pay is not the only issue that attracts our employees by any means, and training often does feature quite highly. So I think if we were in a position to reverse the current policy of supporting employees 100% through some very expensive qualifications, that would significantly help us to retain some of our rising talent and as I say, benefit from that public investment for a much longer period than is probably otherwise the case.
As I say, would be you've got to get them in the door first before you can train them. So they both work together, as far as I'm concerned. I was just going to point out, if you had a member of staff going on a master's degree for 2 years, that's £18,000 up at Sheffield. So kind of suddenly £50,000 doesn't look a lot. But I just wondered, in the NHS, we use the apprenticeship levy to subsidise vocational training courses, and I presume you would be looking to do the same. So it wouldn't just be a £50,000 budget, would it? Would you also be looking to how you then claim back out of the levy?
Yeah, we do draw down on the levy, and a lot of our apprentice investment has been paid through the levy mechanism.
You just have to be apprentices at a low level, Paul, because even like management apprentices I got my master's degree through the NHS, and that was paid for mainly through the apprentices levy at Chesterfield Royal. So it can work right across the board.
So recommendation 4, we want to carry forward with possibly the idea of putting an estimate of the number of people who might benefit in any one year. So going on to number 5, the authority to be delegated to head of paid service to temporarily increase staffing resources as proportionate and necessary in order to enable backfilling of a small number of posts each year for succession planning to take place. So does anybody have a comment on this? Nick?
How do you envisage that working, Paul? What's the temporary part of it? Because surely if you've got a staffing issue and you take steps to try and correct that, can't possibly be temporary because you've then taken the steps. So if the temporary thing is, oh, let's bring this staff member in a grade higher than we normally would because that will get them into post, well, you're not going to say to them after a year, well, you've had a year at that grade, we're now going to drop you back to the appropriate grade. So I just wonder whether temporary is the right word, because surely once a decision's made, it's made. I'm just a bit puzzled on that wording.
Okay, so perhaps I can try and articulate what we're looking at here. So the council already has an approved succession policy, which council approved last November, and basically that requires corporate leadership team and individual directors to identify where we think the future risks are for the authority in terms of perhaps somebody retiring, or if someone was to leave for another position elsewhere, have we got the resilience to actually enable someone to be promoted into that successive role? So the succession plan, which we're implementing for the first time this year, is starting to identify some of those areas. So it goes back to the workforce profile. Half of our workforce could legitimately retire in the next 5 years. We need to identify the rising stars now, invest in them, and make sure that when those persons do leave the organisation, be it for retirement or other reasons, that we've got somebody in-house who we can promote. If I was to try and develop some of those individuals at the moment to those successive roles, they're already doing full-time jobs in their present role. So there isn't the capacity for them to sit next to an accountant or a planner to actually learn and develop in what that succession role might look like. So what this is suggesting is, for argument's sake, if we know that an employee is going to retire in the next 12 months, and we've got a rising star who we want to invest in as part of the succession plan, in order to allow that knowledge transfer, I need to bring a resource in to do the lower graded job, if you like, backfill the person who's going to succeed into the higher paid role. Because just saying, you're going to succeed X in 12 months' time they haven't got the capacity or the time to learn what that role actually is. Get involved in those day-to-day duties that higher paid position actually is responsible for. So it might not happen in a huge number of cases, but I can think of a number where in the next 2 years, this really could come into its own, but we do need that capacity to develop that sort of second-tier role, if you like.
Whether maybe just fleshing out your recommendation, just to include exactly what you've just said, I think will provide some additional context for everyone.
Any other comments on that?
I think I would just like to say on that, how you've just explained it out seems more beneficial, and I think we're all around the table here look to be more about making what in-house in promoting. So we're in favour of bringing consultants in or expertise for a certain amount of time. What you've just said to me sounds of common sense, because we're still keeping it in-house.
Would the person who came in backfilling, would they be, given that the other person was going to get promoted, would they then fill that position on a permanent basis?
They could do, because in an ideal world, we would like to provide opportunities for everybody right the way through. So if you've got an effective succession plan, you're not just thinking about the top positions, if you like, the management positions. You're looking for the younger people to develop and step up and gradually work their way to the top. So as a point of principle, it could reflect throughout the whole of the organisation, but somewhere there's going to be somebody who needs their job backfilling in order to allow them to have the capacity to learn the successive role, whatever that may be.
Okay, shall we include that one in the list? Yep. Okay then. Going on to recommendation 6 then, that the recruitment and retention reserve be utilised to meet the cost of sustaining an apprenticeship programme where existing budgets are unable to meet the full cost of salaries. That an allocation of £5,000 is made from the recruitment and retention reserve to implement the Make a Difference campaign in the Derbyshire Dales. Given our age profile, I feel that this is absolutely essential. Perhaps we need more apprentices than the 4 we've got at the moment.
I would entirely agree, Chair, and certainly if we have the resources available to us, we could actually develop a stronger apprenticeship programme, particularly in some of the areas where we are expecting employees to move on in the next couple of years. So we've done as much as we can within the resources we currently have, but with additional resources we could do so much more.
Yeah. Okay, does anybody else want to comment on this? Yeah. No? Actually,
I totally agree with that. We've got to invest in the young people and bring them on board. So, the extra money is worth it for what we're going to get out of it, definitely. Because a lot of the senior staff are coming up to retirement, so definitely need this. Yeah.
I feel like I'm in room 101 here, but not putting everything in the bin. Okay, recommendation 7.
Chair, just on that one, we might need to spell out, I know it has been referred to tonight, that it's an LGA campaign, but the Make a Difference campaign, just standing alone like that as a recommendation might not be clear to everybody what that is.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Make a difference.
Okay.
Yeah. It needs to be clear to people what the campaign is. Yeah.
Okay, recommendation 7, that accelerated grade progression be permitted in career graded posts based upon an assessment of skills, knowledge, qualifications and operational need. I think we want to include that one. Recommendation 8, that the District Council subscribes to the Infinistats service to enable regular programmed salary benchmarking to be taken place. Yeah, okay. And recommendation 9, that consideration be given to amending the grade boundaries of grades 4, 5, 6 and 7. I think we've discussed that and the issues around the number of spine points. So are we in agreement that that should take place? Good. Okay.
Well, the only thing I'd add on that, is there a consideration of merging your bands 2 and 3 together? Because the pay, and I know you will get some pay awards which may kind of widen it a bit further, but they're so close together, you could actually use that as by merging them, you could then create increments within that lower band to develop your lower staff. And the fact that you've got no people at band 3 would seem like a real opportunity to do that. You can almost get rid of band 2 actually your starting point is band 3 because it has a lower starting point, which is the band 2 starting point. I don't know, just seems like kind of something staring straight in the face.
I think just to comment on that, Chair, I think it is probably the intention of the national pay review bodies to gradually lose those bottom points on the pay spine, and they're certainly looking at a 2-year review, isn't it, of the spinal column structures. So I think in any event that's likely to come about even if we don't do it ourselves.
Okay, so recommendation 9 has approval. Recommendation 10, that the job evaluation scheme be revised to enable the use of grade 14. I just had one point on this. It suggests that the people in grade 13 are doing grade 14 roles at the moment. Is that correct?
I certainly think that insofar as some of the grade 13 posts that we have with the market supplements are operating above the pay for grade 13, yes. So this has the effect of providing that opportunity to be much more competitive in the market for those types of individuals, but hopefully it will eliminate the need for the market supplements as well. So there's a bit of a dual benefit to this one. But there will be some grade 13 managers that are operating at salaries which are certainly not competitive in relation to other authorities.
And what about the job evaluation? Would their jobs would it be possible to, within their job description at the moment, to put that into a grade 14?
What the process would be, Chair, is that we would introduce the new criteria into the existing scheme to allow it to be scored against, grade 14 factors, and then those jobs will go back through the evaluation process. So you will get some grade 13 posts who will be regraded into grade 14. You might get some who stay the same. So it shouldn't be the case that everybody on grade 13 will automatically go into grade 14. That won't happen. But it will allow that additional opportunity to recognise the level that some of those individuals are operating at.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? So this reached general approval, I believe. Okay, so we'll move on. So recommendation 11, that consideration be given to the feasibility and affordability of a one-off enhanced pay award.
Question, how do you feel that this is going to be effective? What are we achieving from that particular recommendation?
Effectively, because this wouldn't be something that would happen every year, it would just give an additional financial enhancement in terms of the competitiveness of the pay grades. If you had an employee who's currently at the top of their grade, and it was the case that they would get the National Pay Award plus 1 increment, then the pay grade would move up by 1 increment. So the top of grade 7 at the moment would move up to the bottom of grade 8. So it just makes you that little bit more competitive. The challenge with this is it would be quite expensive to do. I've not costed this within the report, but it is something that I know other authorities have looked to implement. So that's the reason why it's been put in. But Deborah, do you want to say any more around the technicalities of it, or?
Well, I think we get feedback from staff that our salaries are potentially less than some of our neighbouring authorities. So moving everybody's job up by 1 increment would make us more competitive straight away with similar roles in other authorities. And I think it goes back many, many years when job evaluation was put in here, and the pay awards that have happened since then. So this would just put us back on more level footing with our other local authorities around us. But it is quite an expensive thing, and it's a one-off investment. But of course, having invested with one sum of money, 150,000 or whatever it might be, it's an enduring cost because the further pay awards, they're then on top of this new salary. So it's not just a one-off investment and that's it. It's one-off investment to get us up an increment, but then there's the pay awards each year on top of that. So obviously with that, you're saying it's expensive, then I do feel then we need figures put down for members to be able to look at that, because I think that will be the consideration, because we've already, asking about the golden handshake and the manoeuvring around. So I just think, yes, I know we want to keep people and we want to entice them and not go to a different authority and the likes, but I think cost effectiveness has to be the biggest issue out of all this, and figures do have to be put in front of members within that.
Nick. So again, just on the technicality of it, so I get the purpose for it, and it seems quite sensible if it's going to pull us up to be more competitive. But are we doing it based on the individuals who are already employed to us, or are you applying it to the job roles? Because I just wonder whether then it creates, if it's about the people who work for us now and we offer them all one increment, then a new member of staff comes in. How does it work for that new member of staff? Are they then on the original banding, so getting paid less than the current? I just wonder what the technicality is in terms of what you're proposing. You're proposing just applying to every job role bands up, or is it about actually almost come back to that thing about a loyalty payment to your current staff to reward them for their hard work?
In effect, you would there would be a one increment step change in the boundaries of each of the grades, so it would apply to everybody, not just existing staff. So the whole of the pay span would move up one increment in that one particular year, and then it's clearly fixed for successive years.
Gareth, did you have a point?
Yeah, forgive me if I've missed something with this. Is this sort of something that's just delegated one-off and the council doesn't know about it, or is it?
No, Chair. As I said earlier, this report is really about presenting you with options. Before any of this can be implemented, the report that will come through G&R committee and possibly then council will put financial costings against whatever recommendations you are happy to go forward with. Now, I say that this would be expensive, and it would be expensive. I've not asked our finance team to go to the time and expense of calculating it for the purpose of this evening's meeting, but clearly, in order to bring anything forward, should you want to go with this as a further consideration, it would be costed, and it would be a council decision, because it would actually have an impact upon the overall the pay budget.
Okay, I'm minded to take Sue Ball's point and say that if we put this forward, then we must have a full estimate of the cost of doing so, because it'll be a long cost. It'll go on forever as a result. Does that meet? Yep, okay. Recommendation 12, that consideration be given to options that recognise the amount of additional hours currently worked by some employees without pay or recognition, and measures be introduced to recognise and compensate for lost hours worked. Now, this is I understand this to be a real problem, that the amount of hours that staff work at senior levels is quite excessive. One or two measures in here about selling time back to the council and selling holiday leave back to the council and other measures. So I think as a scrutiny committee, I would be quite interested in looking at one of the reasons why senior staff have to work excessive hours, and I turn to the meetings that we hold, which are quite long, and we have quite a lot of officers at the meetings. And I'm wondering whether, as a scrutiny committee or a governance working group, should look at the excessive time that officers are having to put in beyond what their contracted hours are.
Didn't didn't mean to be. I'm slightly a bit nervous about this one, in actual fact, because I just think that when you're at a certain level, you sort of accept when you're on those higher pay grades that it's, you know, in the private sector, for instance, people work ungodly hours, and people who are self-employed work ungodly hours. You know, it is just something that you take on board at that level. And to try and monitor this and put it into some system would be very difficult. And I just think it's something that even in the, you know, public sector, it's a fact of life that at that level you just are slightly sort of committed to the role rather than just on the clock.
Oh, I think I was next. I completely agree with that because I think for very senior roles, it should be an expectation of the role that you go above and beyond. You're getting paid reasonably well. It happens in other public sectors, happens in the NHS. I think for the lower band roles, though, I think that's unacceptable that we're not paying people for the time they work, and especially when we're carrying vacancies as an organisation, which creates surplus. I think the reasonable thing to do would be looking at how you reinvest the surplus from vacancies into funding payment for people doing additional stuff or going above and beyond in certain grades. Toil works to a certain level, but the thing is, from an organisational point of view, toil hurts you on slim resource, because if your staff then take the toil, you haven't got them in the building working. I always think it's better where you possibly can to pay for additional hours. That rewards the staff, they know their work is valued, but it also means that you're paying them the extra time, which means you've still got their 37 hours the next week and the week after and the week after, and you're not having to give up that toil back to them because you've already paid them. So I would like to see this explored probably a little bit further in terms of what other mechanisms could the council be using to, one, reduce any unpaid kind of hours below a certain band, and I'd leave that to you to decide where that banding kind of criteria sits. But we've got to find a way, because I'm guessing that a lot of staff are working such long hours because we haven't got enough staff in the organisation to do what we need to do, so we should be paying them. So kind of, I think extra stuff needs to go into that one, really.
Thank you, Chair. I get where Gareth's coming from, really. When you work for yourself, you work a lot of hours in the private sector, much more hours than what we do in local government. But same as Nick said, people need to be paid equivalent to what they're doing, really. So, especially in flood duties, as an instance where we expect people to come out all hours and do the work, and we really got to pay them properly. But probably as more senior management can take a brunt of this, but I think the lower, people on the ground need more pay for coming out at all hours. So I do agree with Nick, really.
Is that part of their terms and is that part of their terms and conditions for the senior staff, that there is an expectation that they work beyond their contract? Because like even in my role in the NHS, that's part of my role. I don't get overtime for stuff. It is an expectation that you put in the extra when needed.
Yeah, if I can come back, Chair, on both that point and Councillor G's point. Full-time employees are contracted to 37 hours. Yeah. Nobody operating at director level or senior manager level works 37 hours in this organisation. There are significant numbers of staff work well beyond that, and it comes back to the point raised by Councillor G, that is acknowledged as something that's required when you're at a senior level in an organisation. There is that expectation that you will serve the needs of the organisation when when you do need to fulfil your role. But there's a point of reasonableness, and having been in this organisation for many, many years, I am starting to see employees who are absolutely, totally committed to this organisation, have been throughout that duration, now starting to ask questions in terms of, you know, the amount of hours I'm sat in committee meetings or working groups or evening meetings, and I'm just not able to take any of that time back because I've got a really busy day job to do. We are starting to lose goodwill. And if this organisation loses the goodwill, to be honest, it will not function effectively, because it doesn't function on people doing 37 hours a week. Absolutely not. It functions on people putting in the hours and doing what they need to do. But there is a point of reasonableness, and I think we are reaching that point.
Sue?
Do you foresee, if we manage to get the members of staff and bring up the resources that we're looking to achieve, that this actual issue will eventually go down? Because obviously at the moment this is due to the fact that we're short-staffed and on top of extra, like you say, when we're short-staffed, we're not, that committee meetings are taking so long, it's the conciseness of them, I understand that, but do you feel that if we're filling these positions up, that some of that would go? And if you don't quite just there, then I think a bit more work possibly needs to go into coming up with something to do with that as regards.
In response, no, I don't think it will go. Because look at the types of officers who are functioning at these levels. Just, you know, reflect back on the officers that are sat in council meetings, committee meetings, working groups. They are the directors and the senior managers. They're not the areas where we've got vacancies, with the exception of development control. But you don't see the development managers sat in council and committee meetings apart from the planning committee. So, you know, just think about the officers that are turning out regularly, just what you see. There's a lot goes on behind the scenes that you don't see, in terms of them having to write reports at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, having to work Sundays to get something done. Just keeping on top of the amount of correspondence that is generated by emails is a job in itself, and I'm sure you find that as members. Now, all of this is starting to impact on the length of the working week, and that on top of sitting 3 hours, 4 hours in a committee meeting and not being asked a single question or contributing to any debate is not the best use of officer time. So coming back to Councillor Hughes's point, I do think there is a piece of work to be done regarding perhaps the Constitution Working Group thinking, when do we require officer attendance at these meetings? Can the meeting function solely based upon what's in the report? Can we have an arrangement whereby any questions are asked in advance so that someone's not sat in a meeting for 4 hours and says nothing? It's those types of issues which I think we do need to address. But as I say, Councillor Bull, coming back to your point, filling all the vacancies will not deal with this issue.
Nick, I've just come back because I'd say I'm absolutely convinced by what Paul's just said, and I think we do need to have a think about how we recompense kind of all staff. I also think Paul makes a valid point, and it's something for us as councillors to have a serious think about, and I think we need to have a long, hard discussion about how we run our meetings. I've been a councillor now for a year. I'm frankly appalled at how some of our meetings have gone in that year. I think they're unnecessarily long, the agendas are overloaded, we waste not only officers' time, we don't value our time and respect our time. And I think we need to have a serious conversation as a council. And I know that's not part of Paul's point, but I think it's really valid. And I think we need to find a way of facilitating that conversation between us as councillors, right? Not political, all councillors. We need to have, and I think we need to have some stronger terms of reference and standards of procedure in terms of how we conduct ourselves in meetings. Because I think we are 100% to blame for how long the meetings go on, and which then directly impacts hard-working officers. So yes, you've completely convinced me, Paul. Absolutely, I think you should be looking at how you facilitate recompense for people's time right across the organisation, and then I think there's some homework for us to do as well.
Nick? Oh, sorry, Gareth, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I did recognise this when I was at Amber Valley, because I was the chairman at Standards for several years. So what I did is I changed the meetings to 4 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. And that was entirely to make sure that the officers who had to attend those meetings could go home at a normal time. Now, I'm not saying you can do that with all the meetings, and I take on board the point that Councillor Whitehead said. He's right about that, because, I mean, some full council meetings, there's a lot to get through, and they do go on too long. But I think you could look at the possibility of having earlier start meetings with some of the committees.
Can I suggest, I'd like to sort of shorten this a little bit, that one of our recommendations is that the Constitution Working Group examines the terms of reference for meetings, and with a view to reducing the officer commitment to attending meetings as far as we possibly can. And this may mean that individual councillors have to take on the role of introducing papers that are at the moment introduced by officers. It probably means that questions have to be taken in advance, and we have a week. We get the papers a week in advance. That should be enough time. And perhaps it involves a technical solution, which would be some sort of bulletin board where the answers to questions are posted on a bulletin board so all councillors can see them. Because I think one of the reasons why we don't ask questions before is we know that the answers will be private. We don't, and they need to be public. So we need, perhaps there's a little bit of technology. It's probably there in the system already. We just need to implement it. And would that meet with the group's favour?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is there any other points that need to be made? Peter, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Chair. I think the meetings have been extremely long. I've been on the council a long time now, and I've never seen the meetings of the last year or so long. It's not tenable to keep doing this. The meetings going on to 10 o'clock and even beyond that. It's just not. We should not be doing it, and it needs to be addressed, and what your proposals, Chair's come up with is acceptable in my opinion.
Roger. Yeah, without extending this any longer, and this is a vicious circle, isn't it? I would just make a plea to councillors. Perhaps we need some training in this for brevity in their own conduct, but I would also say this comes back to a point which I think I've made before, which is that some of the reports that we get, in fact a lot of the reports we get, are overly long, and so that means that the process of digesting them only leads to questions coming up at the last minute. So there are some cultural issues here, but I would just say I'm horrified if we are accepting that work-life balance is going out of the window at that higher level on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. Let's carry on then. I'm aware of the time. Where are we up to? Is it 12? 13. Okay, thank you. I can't find it. Oh, here we are. That consideration be given to the cost and feasibility to the development of an enhanced employee support and benefits package. So this is things like cars and other. I mean, there is. You can buy electric cars without having to pay income tax on the money if you get the right scheme and your employer has the right scheme. So it's that sort of zero cost incentive that might be of value here.
Yeah, I understand some of that and the likes, but obviously we need to be getting the recruitment side of it going first. And maybe, this is dangling a carrot, and like we've said before, we've got a lot of members of staff that have been here for quite considerable amount of years, and then suddenly this is all coming in for the newer people. So maybe this is probably not as important as to what other things that we're trying to introduce, but that's just my opinion at the moment, benefiting because it looks as though we're trying to entice newer people when we've had all these staff that have been working for numerous years and not had that incentive in that time. But
I think there is only one thing on the cards here, and that's the electric vehicle payment, which would actually save us some money from loss, because we wouldn't have to pay as much national insurance.
Yeah, just to comment on Councillor Bull's point, Chair, this would apply to all employees, not just any new employees. So what this is about is just developing a package at preferably zero cost to the council, because there are financial schemes and benefits available through taxation, which would allow the employees to, as the report says, perhaps lease an electric vehicle. It would reduce cost to the council taxpayer through national insurance pension contributions, but nonetheless it's something which, again, other authorities are starting to utilise. So we need to work up some more details as to what the package might look like, but the emphasis is applying to all employees at very low cost to the council itself.
Councillor G.
I'm not sure if this already happens, but do employees get any sort of preferential access to the leisure centres currently? Does that already happens?
They have the opportunity for reduced membership subscription.
So would this proposal also include things like ride to work, so kind of getting bikes, so rather than electric cars, bikes? In the NHS, well, Chesterfield, we used to use a thing called VivUp, where you could basically buy stuff from Currys, and then you could spread the payments over 12 months, and it would basically salary sacrifice it, come out your wages, so you'd save a bit of tax. So it's all those sort of things. It's not just electric cars.
Yeah, it's looking at all of those types of opportunities, just to see what an attractive employee support and benefits package could look like, yeah.
Okay, so given that this is probably zero cost or very minimal cost, we keep this in, okay?
yeah, Chair, could you put, like, e.g. an example, within this recommendation when you're putting it out, say that if we did X, it would be zero cost, or just have one beneficial package?
I think it's really there already in terms of the electric cars.
It is, but you're basing it just on that. And I think we would, if you put specifically to put it to one particular area, it saves the debate on somebody saying, well, should you go to this or should you go to that? If we just say, well, you'll get benefits, if we stipulate what the benefit is, in a sense, it just cuts that, well, couldn't we have it on this or could we have it on that type of thing?
I think this is an in-principle recommendation, and with an example already in there, so I think that's all right. Okay. Recommendation 14, the consideration be given to increase the annual leave allowance by 1 day for full-time staff and pro rata for part-time staff to bring parity with other local councils.
So yeah, I'm surprised it's so low. So not even just parity with local councils. I mean, I think the NHS starts at 28 days. And then is there anything you're going to build into this about, again, loyalty? So the longer you've been, so in the NHS after 5 years, you get an extra 2 days. After 10 years, your annual leave goes up to 32 days. Wouldn't something like that, again, have the incentive to kind of retain staff? But I absolutely agree, you should be at least at parity with other local authorities. And actually, if you want to be more attractive than local authorities, why limit yourself to 26 days? Why don't you go to 28 days and match the NHS?
Just in response, Chair, the only additional leave qualification that staff got is you do receive a further 4 days after 5 years service, but nothing after 10 or even beyond that. We do have a number of staff who purchase additional leave. Again, that's a financial benefit from the council, and that's covered in the next section. But the issue with annual leave parity, if you like, is something that was a decision taken back in 2009-10 when we moved on to the job evaluation and the single status arrangements. The decision was taken by management of the council at that time that we would actually go to the lower annual leave rather than the annual leave which others were awarding at that point, and we've never changed that since. And our staff are aware of that.
Laura.
Compared to private sector, this actually is quite generous, I think. I mean, I get 25 days equivalent a year, and I think a lot of organisations start at 25 and go up to 28. So compared to private sector, I don't think it's stingy, but I absolutely agree that we should have an extra day. I'm just not thrilled with the idea of forcing people to take it at Christmas. My organisation gives an extra day of religious leave that you can take for any religious festival. So I think it would be more inclusive, actually, to say you can have an extra day and you can take it. I don't know if we do have any, Muslim or Jewish staff, perhaps we don't, but allow a little bit more flexibility as to when it's taken. I think it would be worth more.
At one point I'd wanted to pick up, quite a few times we've heard this phrase to give us parity with other local councils. I mean, have we got any actual statistics about what other local councils do and which ones they are in relation to ourselves, rather than assuming that these other local councils give better benefits? I mean, are we talking about places like Amber Valley or North East Derbyshire, High Peak, etc.?
Well, pretty much for a number of the recommendations in this report, as I said at the outset, we've looked at what other people are doing to try and make themselves more competitive. And on this particular issue, it's not so much that people are introducing these changes to do more, it's that they've always done it. And we've always been behind in terms of the leave entitlement that this authority gives to our staff compared to that which does exist elsewhere. So, I haven't done that sort of ticking every single authority in Derbyshire to see what they do, but Deborah has done benchmarking through the HR managers group, and this is the conclusion that came out of that benchmarking.
I mean, we've got a representative from Erewash Council here, so maybe we can have some statistics.
Well, I think we're going to, if we're proposing that we join a benchmarking scheme, so I think that will come out in future examples when we look back again at this.
It's also part of the psychological effect for our own staff, isn't it? What you're working for an organisation and you know that the authority next door, you're getting better pay, more holiday. It's ridiculous. We need to start valuing the staff we've got. We know how hard working they are. I mean, that's the thing that my eyes have been opened, because I've not really seen the mechanisms of how a council runs, and you just assume it just runs. We pay for it through our council tax, and it's reasonably well funded. Obviously, the reality is completely different, and actually the resource is so slim. And I am so impressed and grateful as a member of this community at how hard the officers work and contribute. And I think it's about time we started hearing actually that we value that, and it's all very well saying that with words, but words don't pay the bills or make people feel secure in their jobs. We need to reflect it in how we treat people through their working conditions. And if all we're doing is trying to match other local authorities, good God, that should be the minimum we're doing. So absolutely 100% support this.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with Nick. When I worked for the Environment Agency, we had much better leave on what the local government's got. We need to be on parity, definitely, with other local council, definitely. And the employees look at this and say, as Nick's already said, that next door, Amber Valley's paying more money and what we are getting more leave than what we are getting. We should be on level parity with other councils, definitely. And if we're not, we should address this situation, definitely.
Yeah, I'd just like to come back on that. The point I was really trying to make is that we're being told about the parity with other local councils, but when this is going to governance, they need to know, where are this parity in terms of how many, what other local councils are offering, etc. Because you can't just say that. It's not hearsay, is it? It's got to be a fact. So we are actually positioning ourselves either better or the same as.
Okay.
Because, people say, I can get better there, but is that true or not?
So I think the view of the meeting is that we include this recommendation, but we ask that the benchmark is shown to the governance and resources, and that goes to the other where we've referred to other councils in other recommendations as well. Moving on to recommendation 15. That consideration be given to the development and implementation of a scheme to enable employees to sell time, a maximum of 5 days, back to the District Council commencing in the annual leave 2025-26. Laura?
I've got some reservations about this because I think if people are working so hard that they can't take the holiday, that's a problem. And I think allowing people to sell their holiday could lead to burnout. I think people need to take their holidays. I mean, obviously there needs to be some flexibility in terms of carryover, but I think we need to be very careful of encouraging people to sell their holidays rather than looking carefully at why they can't take them.
Peter?
I agree with Laura. Not only that, people have fought years and years to get proper holidays, and then selling the holidays back is not acceptable in my opinion. I think, why didn't people years ago fight hard for get better holidays and then throw it away again? No, I don't believe in that. Thank you.
Dave? So I certainly disagree, because it's not about taking holidays from people, it's about giving people choice and control over what they want. So it's not about the council saying, we're reducing your holidays, absolutely, 100% against that. I also agree with Laura that people should, where possible, take the holidays and kind of get the benefit out of it. But this is commonplace, kind of all over the place, public sector, private sector. This is really common. I'm really surprised we don't even have something like this in already. Because it is just, it's not forcing people to sell them or give them up, but I think 5 days seems pretty reasonable that you can, and there is a benefit. There's a benefit to those staff because they can buy more holiday. That's their choice, and so they can have 5 additional days. So they get more out of what they. But some years they might find that they want to sell some back, and that's beneficial to the council because we get more staff time out of them. And the costs are not really any different from our perspective, from a staffing cost. So I'm fully supportive of this. I think it's something that enhances choice for staff. Certainly should not be kind of used as a strong arm tactic to force people, but I think as long as it's done in a considerate way, which is how Paul's phrased it, I think it's absolutely part of modern kind of working life.
Gareth?
Yeah, maybe I should be compromised on this issue because I definitely want people to go on holiday and book them. But I agree with Councillor Whitehead on this. I mean, this is a choice. If a lot of people don't want to go on holiday, and if they'd rather go to work, and we're short of staff at work, then it's got to be a good one, really. So I'll go along with that.
Shall we take a quick vote on this to see where we stand? So all those in favour of recommendation 15? So I think recommendation 16, that as part of any enhanced employment benefit package, consideration be given to options for payment of one professional subscription for employees who are members of a designated list of relevant professional bodies. Right. Comments?
I think the only thing I'd say in this is it's just understanding the cost, because some professional bodies are quite kind of expensive in their annual fees. I think most in the public sector seem to be reasonable. The one I'm in is £350 a year, but I pay that myself. So while I understand that as a benefit, it's one of those things that I think again comes back to costing. So I think you'd have to sort of understand how many staff you have on your payroll that actually are a member or could be a member of a kind of a professional institute, and then probably an estimate of what those costs kind of might be to the council, because it might be more significant than you realise. So maybe actually but you do, mind you, you're only recommending a part payment, so it could be like staff pay 50%, the organisation pays 50%, that might make it more affordable. But yeah, I think probably to help the other committee, maybe some estimates would be useful.
Does that meet approval?
Yep.
So I just want to say, I think this is a no-brainer, Adam Staggard, that we don't pay these in full. I don't see any distinction if the qualification is relevant to the role. What's the distinction between a planner and an environmental health professional and a solicitor? Should all be paid.
Okay.
Perhaps I could just add to that point, Chair, if I may, and I entirely subscribe to the views that Councillor Whitehead's reflected here. I think there's a win-win on both sides with this, because if we reflect upon the early discussions regarding career grades and gates that you've got to get through, for some of these jobs, the gate could be to be a member of your professional institute. So there's an incentive to the employee to develop, fulfil their CPD requirements and become a full member of the institute, and that may well get them through the grade. And there's also the benefit to having more employees who are part of the institutes and are required to go through the CPD on an annual basis. So to give you an example, not all of our planning staff are members of the Royal Town Planning Institute, because there's no requirement for them to be, certainly in the lower graded post, but it would be a distinct advantage to have more within the RTPI, and that would go for other professions as well. So I think there's a bit of a win-win. I do take the point regarding the cost, because most employers are able to actually reclaim this back through their tax coding as well. So, we may wish to put a limit on it, either in terms of the financial limit or the institutes that we expect our staff to be members of. So there's probably a little bit more work required on this, but that was the premise of the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I just wonder, could it be looked at, so the recommendation about the vocational budget in terms of training, could these two be, aren't they, they're a little bit linked, aren't they? Could they be linked? Could that be a pool of money in terms of that we create that covers the training and the accreditation?
Yeah, they could be, yeah.
Gareth?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go against the grain on this one, because I just think if you're a professional, and for instance, if you want to be a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute, I mean, how much does it cost? Do we know how much it costs to be
I know, because I pay my subscription still, so it's £388 this year.
Yeah, so I don't think this is a cost that the council needs to pick up. I mean, you actually said that it's not a requirement. I think this is a personal choice, because we're going to have to watch the costs of all these additional items, aren't we? So I'd have to go against that one, I'm afraid.
What if we made it for the where it's required for the job?
Is that the current position?
Not for all jobs. So again, it comes back to developing our own, insofar as there is no requirement on staff to be a member of their professional institute. Well, I can't actually think of any job which requires that as part of their conditions of employment. But what you tend to find is that because of their own professional standing and pride, if you like, then most of the staff in the senior positions are a member of their professional body, be that RTPI, Environmental Health, SIPFA, Institute of Housing, whatever it may be. But it's not, apart from those in the report, it's not a standard requirement of anybody's contract of employment that they're a member of their institute now.
I just don't see why, as a council, we want to pick up this tab, because in another conversation we'll be worried about if we can afford all these things, and I think this is one that I'm sorry.
Okay, should we take a vote on this then? So all those in favour of recommendation 16, show. All those against? So forward, but perhaps we have reservations. Yeah. And then we have the additional recommendation. I can't remember what that was now. Pardon? Engagement with universities, yeah, in a pragmatic way. So can I now ask somebody to propose that we take all 17 recommendations. Oh, okay, we can vote on that if you like. Or, right, do you want to vote on it?
I'll trust Tommy to come up with some wording.
Right. So do you want the wording now?
Well, no, I'm happy to trust Tommy to come up with some.
Okay.
Basically, we've already discussed.
We have, and I think there was a general view that going to universities was a good thing. So can I ask somebody to propose that we take all 17 recommendations and take them to the...
Yep, happy to kind of recommend the 17 options to kind of pass on to the next committee to review. So
with the comments that we've made.
With the additional comments and any concerns that have been raised.
Right. Can I have a seconder? I'm going to give this to Sue. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I beat you first. I were quicker at the gun. Yeah, I'd like to second it. Thank you, because obviously I think we have scrutinised it quite well. We've gone through them. We haven't just literally, said yes, no. We have given reasons and to make it a little bit, hopefully, a bit more easier for those on the GNR committee to be able to come up with their answers and approvals. So yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, so now we have the vote. So all those in favour of the, okay, and that is unanimous.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. Are we adding in the recommendation about the separate piece of work about investigating a more efficient committee working to reduce senior officers?
We haven't done so. Would you like to?
I agree with that.
Would you like to?
And he's proposing. I'm happy to propose.
Would you like to propose that?
Yeah.
Second that, Chair.
Peter Stack will second that. All those in favour? Unanimous again. Could you use your microphone?
Include the possibility of some meetings being started earlier, so it's within the daytime, in effect. I mean, my example was 4 o'clock start. Some meetings might last an hour or two, and then the staff can go home.
I think they would look at generally. We're not going to limit that, I don't think. Now, if we were 101, we'd ask Councillor Phillips to sit in the chair and then get thrown backwards, but I don't think we're going to do that. And so I think what we will do instead is go on to the next item on the agenda, which is, can I look at your paper? What is it? Oh, it's to update on the flooding scrutiny exercise. Now, I must say that we have made no progress since the meeting we had with the council with the Derbyshire County Council on flooding way back, I think, before the previous meeting, the previous scrutiny meeting. The minutes of the previous scrutiny meeting called on three of us to arrange a working group to put forward to create some proposals about how we take this and write a report recommending a course of action. I think it's up to us now to do that. So I think what I will do is I will write to the people referenced in the minutes action to do that and ask them to set up a meeting. And the same will go for the other meeting that was supposed to have been set up, the other working group that was supposed to have been set up according to the minutes, and that was to do with the consultation process and what improvements we can make to that. So I will take that as an action on myself to write to those two groups of people so that we can, and with a view to coming back to this committee in probably in about 2 months' time with each. Would that be okay? All right, so I will do that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Take this. It's disappointing that we've gone right to this time of year when we should have been tackling this way back in the early summer. Flooding's essential. We've got to get to grips with it. So I agree with the Chair that we've got to really push this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward, I'm one of the people I'm going to write to, so I'm implicated in this. So on the next point is the work programme, and so I don't know if you had a chance to review the work programme and where we are. So today we've looked at enhanced staff recruitment. What we need to do at the next meeting is look at the corporate plan again and policies to identify any possible issues relating to indirect discrimination. And this was, I mean, for example, does the excessive amount of time that senior staff have work, does that have an impact? Has an impact under equalities legislation? It might very well do. So the issue is really to consider how we can take forward, how we can evaluate whether our policies may lead to indirect discrimination under the Equalities Act and others. Does anybody want to add anything to our work programme?
Can I just add something from what you've just said about that, about some of the officers and and our policies? Because obviously I would have said, and Mike made a point about it when he was talking about the MPPF, writing all the policies and the local plan and the likes, of trying to get more money out of government to do that because of the amount and costings that it comes to. So is there something that we can look into that? For that being the excessive time that members, officers in the higher departments have to spend writing these policies up. So, you know, making that a point.
Okay. So what do you, because they have to write more policy, they...
Well, Mike alluded, when we was in the meeting for the MPPF, it was a C&E meeting we was at. And he actually sat there and he said, you know, it takes me a lot of time and it's paid by the public purse, i.e. because it's coming from out of our council tax that the council gets, although he's employed by us. But part of that employment is not just for him to be sitting down and spending as much time as he is, especially when he's having to answer 106 very complicated and misjudged questions, and some of it, where for writing, where it could be possibly gotten from a different way. So maybe looking at how we can gain money from outside, paying our staff to do some of these policies that aren't subject to us having to do, if you will, or making them statutory policies for us. I don't know if that's...
Do we already get that? Do we look for that sort of funding? Or?
No, not routinely for that type of issue. I mean, I think I've got the gist of the point that Mike raised. I think the key thing is, you know, having a much clearer focus on how, as an organisation, you utilise the staff time that everybody pays for, and to try and eliminate those tasks that are being undertaken which perhaps don't add value, take resource away from the things you really want your officers to focus upon delivering, and make sure that we're sort of laser focused, if you like, on delivering positive outcomes rather than filling in lots of forms and consultations which may not actually take us very much further forward from where we already are. So, you know, that's certainly a message which I give to the organisation in terms of utilising time sensibly and efficiently. And perhaps, you know, that is something that we all need to reflect upon when these consultations are undertaken, and we decide, well, do we wish to contribute or not? Is it valuable to us or not? So it may be on a case-by-case basis, but I think the point's well made.
I think the point that Sue was making there is because with this MPPF, it's quite a serious issue that the new sort of guidance in it, as was presented to us last week, has basically put a complete block on our current local plan and the progress with it. And I think the issue here is all the time taken to actually develop that local plan, and actually whether, I think I did question this community and environment, do we need now to basically stop that and just concentrate entirely on the response, which sort of what we're doing, because it's a waste of time? I think, is that something that Scrutiny needs to look at? Because, there's going to be a lot of time taken by officers continuing with the review of the local plan when the parameters have been completely changed.
Roger. Just a quick one on that. Actually, Mike did say that we can continue with many other parts of it in terms of refining the policies. It's the housing bit that's really affected by this. So it's not a complete stop on the local plan.
I feel that it goes beyond what the Scrutiny Committee can do. What we can review our own activities, and we can review activities of other public sector organisations that have an impact on our activities. But I'm not sure that we could address that particular issue. I don't know what our recommendation would look like coming out of that. Would it be to go back to, what is it now? Not DLUC, it's something else now. MHCLG. And ask them for more money. I don't know.
Sorry, Chair. I was just trying to emphasise just upon Mike's, but obviously Paul put it in the better context that, looking at how much extra work is being put for policies or going to consultations or writing papers on something that we need, not just specifically Mike and the MPPF situation. I was just trying to put an illustration of that particular point that we, I think it's looking at all things that we as council, and obviously probably doing it more as a constitution and standards of our committees and everything else of how it's done. And do we really need all these surveys and consultations, because we keep going out to consultation, we keep going around in circles with some of them, and shall I say, and I don't like to say it, but the Gypsy Liaison Group and the likes of that, and going out and asking the same question that we've already answered before and before again. So, that is time wasted of members of the staff. So that's something more that we've got to look at. But I was just trying to make that point that Mike had mentioned.
What is the view of the meeting? Anybody else?
Well, I say the work programme still looks like we've got a couple of good more meetings before we need to sort of add anything else. So I don't think there's any urgency to add anything today, is there?
No, I have the same view, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Could you, if you want that brought forward, Sue, could you work it up into a proposal and bring it back to a subsequent meeting? Okay, thank you. All right, so if there's no other business, I declare the meeting closed. And thank you all for attending, and pleasant rest of the evening.